The sound of the wedding bells echoed across the grand hall, and everyone turned their heads as the bride entered the room carrying a bouquet of white roses and wearing a long veil that touched the ground while soft music played, and the guests whispered among themselves, wondering what she looked like under that veil, because no one had ever seen her face before, and yet today she was marrying the richest man in the city, Ethan Gray, the cold-hearted billionaire known for his arrogance and pride. Ethan stood at the altar in his perfect black suit, his face showing no joy or love, only impatience, as his sharp eyes followed the slow steps of the bride approaching him. And when his best friend Daniel whispered, "She does not look like much, does she?" Ethan smirked and said, "Let us hope the veil hides enough, because I hate surprises that ruin my mood." And his words reached the ears of a few guests who tried not to laugh while others shook their heads in silence. Mia, the bride, heard the whispers, and her hands trembled slightly under her gloves, but she kept walking, her heart beating fast, not because of love, but because of fear and sadness. She had not chosen this marriage. It had been arranged by her guardian to save the small company her late father left behind, a deal that gave Ethan control and her freedom at the same time. When she finally reached the altar, Ethan did not offer his hand. He only nodded as if he was signing a contract, his voice low and cold as ice, when he said, "Let us finish this quickly." And the priest began reading the vows, the crowd watching in tense silence as Mia's veil swayed slightly with every breath she took, and her quiet voice answered, "I do," while Ethan said his words without a single ounce of warmth. Everyone in the hall could feel the distance between them. It was not a wedding of hearts. It was a business deal wrapped in luxury and gold, and still something about the bride made people curious, because even though she looked small and fragile, there was a strange strength in the way she stood, her posture calm, her voice steady, her silence powerful. The priest finally said, "You may kiss the bride," and a wave of excitement moved through the crowd, but Ethan took a step back, his lips curling in mockery. He whispered loud enough for others to hear, "I do not kiss what I cannot see," and the whole went quiet. A heavy silence fell as Mia lowered her head, her fingers tightening around the bouquet. And yet she did not cry. She simply turned her face slightly, as if hiding a secret behind a thin veil that glowed softly under the light. The cameras flashed reporters eager to capture the billionaire's wedding, but what they saw instead was a moment of cruelty, Ethan turning away while his new wife stood alone before everyone's eyes, humiliated and speechless. Daniel tried to whisper something to make it look normal, but Ethan only shrugged, saying beauty is a choice, and she clearly made none, and laughter spread in low tones across a few tables. Mia took a deep breath, her heart aching, but her pride unbroken. She leaned closer and whispered only for him to hear, "One day, Ethan Gray, you will regret this." And he froze for a moment. Her calm voice carried a quiet warning that felt heavier than any insult he had ever received, but he quickly dismissed it with a smirk, thinking she was only being dramatic, unaware that her words would one day haunt him. After the ceremony, they walked down the grand stairs together, the crowd cheering half-heartedly, photographers shouting for pictures. Ethan held his head high as if he were a king, while Mia walked beside him in silence, her veil moving gently in the breeze, hiding her face, but not her sadness, a sadness that touched even the hearts of strangers watching from afar. Inside the car, Ethan crossed his arms and said, "You can keep the veil on for all I care. It makes things easier." And Mia looked out the window at the fading city lights, her reflection faint against the glass. She spoke softly, almost like a whisper, "I will keep it on until you deserve to see what lies beneath." And he frowned, not understanding what she meant. When they reached his mansion, a house so big it looked like a castle, the servants stood in a line waiting to greet them. Ethan walked past them without a word, while Mia followed, her steps slow, her heart heavy. And one of the maids whispered, "She is not what I expected," and another said, "The master will get tired of her soon." But Mia heard it all and still kept walking, her chin slightly raised, her spirit refusing to break. That night the party continued without her. Ethan laughed with his friend, bragging about his new deal, while Mia stayed alone in her room, staring at the moon through the window, the veil still covering her face. She touched it gently and whispered to herself, "Let him laugh, and now for truth always finds its way, and when it does, his laughter will end." Downstairs, Ethan raised a glass of champagne, saying to his friend, "She married me for money, I married her for silence. We both win," and everyone laughed again, but in the corner of his mind a small voice whispered the words he had said earlier, "You will regret this, Ethan Gray," and for a brief second his smile faded, though he quickly forced it back, pretending not to feel the strange chill that passed through him. And in that lonely mansion, under the silver light of the moon, two souls began a story, one of pride and pain, of secrets and revenge, and of a truth that would soon make the arrogant billionaire kneel before the bride he had mocked on the very day he thought he had won. The morning after the wedding, the sun rose slowly over the gray mansion, but the house did not feel warm or welcoming. Instead, it felt like a golden prison where silence ruled and hearts were frozen. Ethan sat at a long dining table reading his newspaper, while Mia entered quietly, her veil still covering her face, her steps soft like the whisper of wind against marble floors. The servants stood by, pretending not to stare, but their curious eyes followed her every move. Ethan did not greet her. He only said without looking up from the paper breakfast is served, sit if you wish. And Mia sat down across from him, her hands resting gently on her lap. She looked at the food that was placed before her, plates of fruit, eggs, and warm bread. Yet she had no appetite. The air was heavy with tension, the kind that could break if a single word was spoken. She finally asked in a quiet voice, "How long do you plan to treat me like a stranger?" And Ethan smiled coldly, saying, "Until you stop hiding your face." Her heart tightened behind the veil. She whispered, "You would not understand." And he replied, "I do not care to understand. I did what I had to do, and now you are here, nothing more." He folded the newspaper, stood up, and left the table without even a glance back, leaving her alone with the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. The servant began to whisper as soon as he was gone. They said, "She is not fit for him. She looks so strange, always hiding her face." One maid said, "I heard the master laugh at her during the ceremony." And another answered, "I heard she married him for money." But none of them noticed that Mia was still in the room, listening, her fingers gripping the edge of the table, though her voice was calm when she finally said, "Perhaps you should focus on your duties instead of stories." And they froze, their faces pale with shock as she walked away. That night, Mia sat in her room by the piano. It was an old grand piano that once belonged to Ethan's late mother. The servants told her no one had played it since she died. The sound of its keys filled the house with memories Ethan had long buried. Mia's fingers moved gently across the keys, playing a soft, sad tune that drifted through the halls and reached Ethan, who was working in his study. The moment he heard it, he froze. The song was the same one his mother used to play every night before bed. He stood up and walked slowly toward the sound, each note pulling him closer, until he reached the doorway of her room. He stopped there, watching a silhouette in the dim light, the long veil falling around her shoulders like mist, her hands moving with grace and emotion. He felt something strange stirring inside his chest, a feeling he could not name. But before he could step closer, she stopped playing. She sensed him there and turned off the lamp, leaving the room in darkness. Ethan walked away quickly, pretending it did not matter, but that melody stayed in his mind long after he returned to his study. He poured himself a glass of wine and tried to focus on his work, yet every time he closed his eyes, he saw her at the piano, her posture calm, her voice from earlier echoing in his ears. "You would not understand." The next day, Ethan hosted a business meeting in the mansion. Important men arrived in suits and ties, talking about numbers and profit, and one of them laughed, saying, "Congratulations, Ethan, your wife must be a lucky woman." And Ethan smirked, replying, "She is lucky indeed, she married me." And the men laughed without realizing that Mia was standing at the top of the stairs, watching, her heart heavy, but her face hidden behind the veil. She turned away before anyone could see her and went back to her room. Later that evening, the sky turned gray with rain and thunder rolled over the hills. Ethan returned to his room tired and irritable. He found the lights off except for a single candle burning on the table beside his bed. There was a note written in neat handwriting: "Dinner is ready in the dining hall. Please come and eat." Mia, he ignored it at first, but something made him go downstairs. When he arrived, the table was set beautifully with warm food, candles, and flowers. Mia sat at the far end, her veil glowing softly in the light. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat down. The silence between them felt like a wall, and finally he said, "Why do you keep trying? This will never be a real marriage." And Mia answered softly, "I do not expect it to be. I only promise to stand beside you, not to be loved by you, but you could at least show kindness." Ethan looked at her, his eyes cold. He said, "Kindness is earned, not given." And she replied, "Then perhaps you should learn what it means to deserve it." And for the first time, her voice carried a quiet strength that made him pause. He almost said something, but stopped instead. He stood and walked away again, leaving her alone once more. As the night grew darker, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hitting the windows. He tried to push away the sound of the piano, the image of her sitting there, her words, her calm strength. But he could not sleep. Something about her unsettled him, and he hated not knowing why. Meanwhile, Mia stood by the window in her room, looking at the storm outside, lightning flashing across the sky, her reflection faint on the glass. She whispered to herself, "He thinks I am weak, he thinks he knows who I am, but one day he will see what lies behind this veil. And on that day his pride will break, just like this thunder tonight." The mansion remained cold and silent, but something unseen had already begun to change. Within its walls, two hearts locked in distance, slowly circling the truth that neither could yet see, and the veil that divided them held not just mystery, but power, a power that would soon shake the billionaire who once believed he could never be moved. The morning sun touched the cold windows of the gray mansion, and yet no warmth entered the house, for inside those golden walls Ethan and Mia lived like strangers bound by paper, not love. The silence between them, louder than any argument could ever be. Ethan sat at the table sipping his coffee, his eyes tired from a night without sleep, when Mia entered quietly, as always, her veil falling over her shoulders like soft snow, and her presence turning every head, though no one dared to speak. Ethan glanced at her, his voice sharp, as he said, "I have a question for you. Why do you keep hiding your face? Are you afraid of what I will see, or afraid that I will laugh again?" And Mia looked at him with calm eyes behind the veil, her tone steady, as she answered, "You already judged me. Before you knew me, I have no reason to show you anything until you learn to see with more than your eyes." And Ethan scoffed, saying, "Your words sound wise, but they change nothing," and he walked away again, pretending her voice did not echo inside his heart. Later that day, a new rumor spread through the mansion. One of the maids whispered to another, saying, "I heard the lady hides a scar on her face. Maybe that is why she never removes her veil." And another said, "No, perhaps she is not the real bride. Maybe the real one ran away, and this woman took her place." And their laughter filled the hall, but stopped when they saw Mia standing there, her hands holding a tray of tea for the guests, her quiet presence making their guilt rise, though she said nothing, only smiled politely and walked past them, her silence more powerful than anger. In the study, Ethan sat with his assistant, reviewing the company's reports, numbers dropping, red ink spreading across the pages. His assistant said, "So the business deal with the East partners failed. We have lost a lot." And Ethan clenched his jaw, frustration burning in his chest. He said, "Find solution. I do not care how." And the man nodded, leaving the room. But just as Ethan dropped his head into his hands, he heard a soft voice behind him saying, "Maybe I can help." He turned to see Mia standing at the door holding a file in her hand. She said, "I overheard your discussion. I have some ideas that might help your company." He frowned. "You, and what do you know about business?" And she replied, "My father owned a small company once. Before he passed, I learned from him perhaps small things can fix big problems." If you look closely, Ethan wanted to laugh, but something about her calm confidence made him listen. That night, he found an anonymous email sent to his office with solutions that perfectly matched what Mia had suggested, and when he followed them, his team was surprised. The results were good. The company began to recover slowly. Ethan asked his assistant who sent these, and the man replied, "We do not know, so the sender used a different name." And Ethan stared at the screen, wondering, could it be her? Days passed. The distance between them began to shift like the tide. Ethan still cold, but more curious. Mia still quiet, but stronger in her steps. One evening he returned home late to find her sitting in the garden under the moonlight, her veil glowing faintly in the silver air. He stopped, watching from a distance, unable to look away. She spoke softly, without turning, "I know you are there, Ethan. Your footsteps always sound heavy when you are angry, lighter when you are thoughtful, and tonight they sound confused." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Tell me who you really are." Mia smiled beneath the veil. "I am the woman you married, and the woman you mocked, yet I am also the woman who may one day." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Tell me who you really are." Mia smiled beneath the veil. "I am the woman you married, and the woman you mocked, yet I am also the woman who may one day change your life." Ethan frowned, his pride stinging. "What makes you think you could change me?" And she answered, "Perhaps not me, but the truth when it comes." The next morning, one of the maids found an old photograph in the library. It was hidden inside a dusty book. It showed a young woman with bright eyes and a gentle smile. She looked just like Mia, but her face was uncovered, beautiful beyond words. The maid brought the picture to Ethan, saying, "Sir, I found this. It might interest you." Ethan stared at it, unable to breathe for a moment. It could not be her, and yet it was the same shape of the lips, the same eyes, the same quiet strength in the gaze. That night Ethan could not sleep. He walked through the halls until he reached her door. He raised his hand to knock, but stopped, the memory of his cruel laughter on their wedding day haunting him. Instead, he whispered softly to the closed door, "Why do you hide who you are? What are you waiting for?" Mia sat inside awake. She had heard his footsteps and his whisper through the wood. Her hands trembled slightly, but she said nothing, her heart heavy with secrets she could not yet reveal. The next day, Ethan called Daniel, his friend, and showed him the photo. Daniel's eyes widened, saying, "This cannot be the same woman. Your wife looks nothing like this." And Ethan said, "I am not sure anymore." Daniel laughed. "Maybe she plays games with you." But Ethan shook his head. "No, it is something else, something I do not understand. She is not ordinary." Daniel, "Not at all." In the evening, Ethan returned to the piano room. The same melody filled the air. Mia, playing with her head bowed, her veil brushing against the keys. He stood silently listening. His emotion twisted inside him. When she finished, he spoke quietly. "That song my mother used to play it. How do you know it?" And Mia turned her head slightly, saying, "Because I was there once long ago, before you were rich, before you forgot what kindness felt like." Her words struck him like lightning. He took a step forward, his voice unsteady. "What do you mean you were there?" And she replied, "Not tonight, Ethan, another time, another story." And she rose from the piano, her movements graceful as a ghost, leaving him standing there in confusion, his heart pounding, his mind filled with questions. And as the door closed behind her, Ethan realized that the mystery beneath the veil was not about beauty, it was about truth, the truth that connected their lives in ways he had yet to understand. And for the first time in his proud life, the billionaire began to fear what he might discover when the veil finally came off. The wind blew softly through the gray mansion as morning arrived, bringing light that touched the marble floors yet failed to warm the cold air inside. Ethan sat at his desk, lost in thought, his eyes on the old photograph, the one showing the woman who looked just like Mia, her beauty haunting him, her face shining with life and mystery. He could not stop staring at it. He turned the picture over and saw a faint signature at the bottom, one single letter, M. His mind kept circling the same question: who was she really, and why did his wife hide behind a veil? He stood and walked through the halls, his footsteps echoing softly. He found Mia in the garden, feeding the birds, a long veil drifting in the breeze, the sunlight wrapping around her like a halo. He felt a strange pull in his chest, something gentle, something human. He said quietly, "I found a photograph in the library. It looks like you." And Mia looked up, her voice calm. "Maybe it is, or maybe it is someone who reminds you of me." And he frowned, frustrated by her calmness. "Why do you always speak in riddles? Why do you never give me a straight answer?" Mia turned to face him, the veil still hiding her face. She said, "Because you never ask the right questions, Ethan. You want to know what I look like, but not who I am, and that is why you will never see me clearly." He felt anger rise inside him, but also confusion. He said, "Then tell me who you are." She paused, her voice low. "I am someone who once knew you, before you became the man you are now." And then she walked away, leaving him standing in the garden with her words echoing in his ears. That evening, Ethan could not work his mind, restless with thoughts of her. He remembered flashes from years ago, a rainy night, a car accident, the girl who pulled him from the wreck before the flames grew high, her face blurred in his memory. He shook his head, thinking, no, it could not be her, yet his heart whispered, yes, it could. The next day, Ethan told his driver to follow Mia. When she left the mansion in the afternoon, she said she was visiting a charity event downtown. He watched from a distance as she stepped out of the car, a veil still covering her face. People greeted her with respect. Children ran toward her, laughing. She handed them gifts, hugged them, comforted them like a mother, her kindness shining brighter than gold. Ethan's chest tightened. He saw her remove the veil slowly, and for the first time, he saw the face she had hidden. The sight took his breath away. She was beautiful beyond words, but not only in looks. Her eyes carried warmth and pain, strength and forgiveness. It was a face of a woman who had lived through heartbreak and still chose to love the world. He stepped back, shocked, unable to believe what he saw. The woman under that veil was the same girl who had saved him years ago when he was just a reckless young man without a fortune. Memories flooded his mind, the sound of rain, the smell of smoke, her trembling hands helping him out of the burning car, and his promise that he would one day find her and thank her, but he never did. He had forgotten her face, forgotten her kindness, until now she was his wife, the woman he had mocked, insulted, and rejected without knowing she was the reason he was alive. Ethan felt his heart twist with guilt. He wanted to run to her to apologize, but something held him back. Shame, maybe fear, maybe both. He watched her from afar as she smiled at the children, her laughter soft like music. She looked so free, so alive, and for the first time he realized how empty his own life had become, filled with money, power, and pride, but no peace. When she turned and saw him standing there, her smile faded. She walked over slowly, her eyes calm, but her voice heavy with meaning. She said, "So now you have seen." Ethan nodded, unable to speak, his throat tight with regret. She continued, "You mocked your own savior, the woman who once pulled you from fire, and now you treat her as a burden. Tell me, Ethan, who is truly blind, a man who sees faces, or the one who ignores hearts?" He tried to speak, but no words came out, his eyes filled with something he had not felt in years, humility. She said, "I did not hide because I was ashamed. I hid because I wanted to see whether you could love beyond beauty, beyond pride. But you failed, Ethan, you failed before you even tried." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back, saying, "Do not touch me, not yet." The drive home was silent. Ethan sat in the back seat, staring out the window, his reflection hollow, his mind filled with her words, his heart heavy. He returned to the mansion alone, her seat empty beside him. When he entered the house, a piano stood open, the same melody waiting for his hands. He sat down trying to play, but his fingers shook. The notes came out broken, just like his soul. Later that night, he walked to her room and found it empty, her clothes gone, her veil folded neatly on the bed, a single note beside it written in her elegant hand. It said, "Truth has no need for hiding you. Have seen now, it is your turn to look deeper." He sank to his knees, holding the veil in his hands, the same veil he had mocked, the same veil that had once hidden the woman who gave him his life. As tears filled his eyes, Ethan whispered her name over and over, begging the silence for forgiveness. Outside, the storm began again, rain pouring over the mansion like a cleansing flood, and for the first time the proud billionaire realized he was no longer the man in control. He was a man who had lost the only light that had ever truly cared for him, and though the house still glittered with wealth, it now felt emptier than ever before. And as thunder rolled across the sky, Ethan swore to himself that he would find her again, no matter how far she went, no matter how long it took, for he finally understood that beneath the veil was not just beauty but truth, and that truth was the only thing that could save him from himself. The mansion stood silent like a forgotten castle, its grand halls filled with shadows and the echo of what once was. Ethan Gray sat alone in his office, his head resting in his hands, papers scattered across the desk, numbers red and sharp like cuts on white paper. The company that had made him powerful was now slipping through his fingers. His phone kept ringing, his assistant kept knocking, but he did not answer because nothing they said could change what he already knew. His empire was falling piece by piece. Since the day Mia left, everything had gone wrong. Deal collapsed, partners turned away, investors withdrew, money vanished faster than he could count. It seemed as if the world itself had turned against him. The proud billionaire who once mocked others now stood surrounded by silence and failure. He looked around the empty room, remembering how the same space once echoed with laughter and music, but now there was only the sound of rain against the windows, a steady reminder of his loneliness. Every night he dreamed of her, the sound of her voice, the way she said, "You will regret this, Ethan Gray." He had laughed at her once, now those words haunted him like a whisper in the dark. He thought about the veil folded on her bed, the note she left behind, the softness of her voice. That last day when she said, "Truth has no need for hiding," he wanted to find her, but he did not know where to start. She had vanished like mist, leaving behind only memories and pain. His assistant Daniel came in one morning with worry written all over his face, saying, "Ethan, the board wants answers. They want to know why you keep avoiding them. We are losing everything." And Ethan said quietly, "I know, Daniel, but how do you explain losing something you never truly deserved?" Daniel had no reply. He simply placed another report on the table and left the room. Later that day, Ethan went to the old piano room where the faint scent of her perfume still lingered. He sat before the keys, his fingers trembling as he pressed a note. The sound came out weak and broken, but still he played the same song she used to play, the one his mother loved, the one that now felt like a piece of her soul trapped in sound. He closed his eyes and whispered her name, Mia, over and over as if saying it could bring her back. In the evenings, he walked through the empty halls talking to himself, imagining her beside him. He would say, "Do you see, Mia, I lost it all just like you said." And sometimes he thought he could almost hear her reply, soft and kind, not cruel, never cruel, just sad. The newspapers began calling him the fallen billionaire. Stories about his failures spread across the city. People who once begged for his attention now pretended not to know him, and for the first time Ethan understood what it meant to be truly alone. One afternoon, while sorting through old papers, he found another letter. It was in her handwriting, but it was unopened. It must have been left behind. Without him noticing, he tore it open, his hand shaking. Inside it read, "Ethan, when you finally stop chasing power and start seeking purpose, you will find me not in the world of gold, but where kindness lies." He stared at the words, his heart pounding. He did not know what she meant, but he knew he had to try. The next morning, he left the mansion for the first time in weeks. He drove through the city, past tall buildings, past the people he once ignored, until he reached a small part of town he barely recognized. He saw a banner above a modest building. It read Hope Foundation, Charity for Children. He stepped inside quietly, the air warm and filled with laughter, and when he looked around, his breath caught, because there she was, Mia, standing among the children, helping them with art, smiling like sunlight after rain. He watched her for a long moment, unable to move. She looked happy, peaceful, alive in a way he never had. She saw him finally, and the smile faded from her face, but she did not turn away. She simply said, "So you found a place where kindness lives?" Ethan took a deep breath, his voice low and rough. "Yes, and I finally understand. I had everything, and yet I had nothing until you came." And she said softly, "Then why did you throw it all away?" He walked closer, his eyes filled with regret. "I was blind, Mia. I saw only what was on the surface. I mocked the only person who ever saw me for who I truly was. I was proud, cruel, foolish. I came here not as a rich man, but as a man who has lost everything except the truth." He reached out his hand, but stopped, afraid to touch her again. She looked at him, her eyes gentle yet distant. The children ran up to her, pulling at her dress, asking who he was. She smiled at them and said, "He is someone who forgot how to see. But he is learning again." The children laughed and ran off while Ethan lowered his head, shame flooding his chest. He whispered, "I do not expect forgiveness, but I want to earn it." She looked at him for a long time before saying, "Forgiveness is not given, Ethan. It is built like a bridge, one step at a time." He nodded, tears burning his eyes. He said, "Then I will build that bridge no matter how long it takes." Mia turned away, continuing her work. But he noticed her hands trembling slightly, as if her heart was not as calm as her face. She said quietly, "Then start by helping those you once ignored." And he smiled weakly, "Yes, I will." That night, Ethan returned home and looked around the empty mansion again, but it did not feel the same. It no longer felt like a home of pride. It felt like a place waiting for change. He took off his expensive watch and placed it on the piano, saying to the empty room, "This does not matter anymore. What matters is finding her again and proving that the man who once mocked her could become someone worthy of her truth." And as the rain began to fall outside, he played the piano once more, the same melody filling the house, this time not as a sound of pain, but as a promise of redemption. And though the mansion was still lonely, it now held a spark of something new, hope. The next morning, light poured through the mansion windows, and for the first time in many months, Ethan Gray felt something new in his chest, not pain, not guilt, but determination. He stood before the mirror and saw a man he barely recognized. A proud billionaire was gone, replaced by someone humbler, someone who wanted to change. He whispered to himself, "Today I begin again," and he left the house without the fancy car, without the suit, without the pride that had once been his armor. He returned to the small charity center where Mia worked, his hand trembling slightly as he entered the room filled with children, their laughter bouncing off the walls. Mia stood near a table helping a little girl draw a picture, her veil gone, her hair tied loosely, and the sunlight touching her face. "Ethan,